but we have an interesting speaker. It's involving the environment. And without going into any announcements or anything, we'd like to just get started. We're running a couple minutes late. Let's see if I can get your introduction correct.
Okay.
His name is Gregory Guidroz. Has worked in just about every aspect of the Bayou Vermillion District and Vermillionville, from removing litter and debris with the river crew to collecting monthly water samples to writing grants and permits, to tour boat captains, bartender, gardener, autism, to the current position as the Director of Environmental Awareness, born and raised in Breaux Bridge, navigating the Atchafalaya swamps near Henderson and Bayou Vermilion is second nature to him, with a background in the environmental and sustainable resource and more than 15 years experience as an environmental educator, working everywhere from the classroom to the backcountry wilderness, setting with troubled teens. Greg is our resident Cajun naturalist and an Eagle Scout, United States Marine, a storyteller, and an outdoor enthusiast. He is a winner of the 2015 Keep Louisiana Beautiful Golden Can Award for his longtime dedication as recycling volunteer for the Festival International and Spirit, and with the establishing DVD's event cycle, bin long programs, as well as a recipient of the Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association inaugural 2014 Vision of the Year Award. And we're certainly happy to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much for having me today. I'm with the Bayou Vermillion District. So the Bayou Vermillion District was established in 1984 by the citizens of Lafayette, and our main goal, our enabling legislation, basically sanctions us to do anything and everything possible to maintain and improve the water quality in the Bayou Vermillion. And we have pretty much a two-sided approach to doing this, and the first approach is focusing on water quality and water management of our water resources, and the other aspect is bringing in economic development along the bayou. So there's a strong connection between the environment and the cultural identity that we know of in South Louisiana. So crawfish, catfish, the seafood industry, just about every aspect of our cuisine that identifies us as Cajun and Creole has a direct connection to the environment, and especially our water quality in our rivers, streams, bayous, and the Atchafalaya Basin most importantly. So at the Bayou Vermillion District, that's our focus, is to combine those elements and raise awareness for the community and do what we can. So a little bit of history. In 1976, the Bayou Vermillion was actually named the most polluted river in the entire United States. We've actually come quite a ways from this, and a little bit more history about that was the pollution and everything that happened in 76 was very closely tied to the Great Flood of 1927. So whenever we think of the Atchafalaya Basin, lots of people think of everything between the levee in Henderson and the levee in Maragouin as being the Atchafalaya Basin. That is actually a man-made spillway system that gathers the water from the Mississippi and contains the floodwaters from the Mississippi, channeling it down the Atchafalaya River and the Atchafalaya spillway. The larger basin actually extends from Lafayette in the west to Baton Rouge in the east. So when the Mississippi River begins to flood and swell, and we have lots of rain from up north coming south in the springtime, the river system has the potential to swell and become a river that's 60 miles wide. And this actually happened in 1927 for the Great Flood of 1927. The Mississippi River overflowed its banks. The town of New Orleans was looking to preserve whatever the development they had in the city, so they dynamited a couple holes in the levee. The hole that they dynamited was one of many levee breaches where the river actually cut through the banks of the levee itself and eventually flowed into the Atchafalaya Basin, relieving the river itself from the flood. So in the 30s, there was a great push from the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that this never happened again. So that's when the Corps of Engineers went on their leveeing campaign, leveeing up the Atchafalaya Spillway. They leveed up the Mississippi River. They also created dam systems north on the Mississippi River to slow that water's approach into the main channel. And when this occurred, basically what happened was, okay, so I'm going to try to create a little vision of what the Mississippi River looks like. If you could imagine a tree and all the branches and leaves, that would be pretty much the top of the Mississippi River. Everything from pieces of Canada to the Rocky Mountains in the west to the Appalachian Mountains in the east. Everything comes down into the Mississippi River. And then when it gets into Louisiana, we're kind of like the trunk. And then we start branching off into the root system. So we have the main route being the Mississippi. We have the Atchafalaya River. There's the Bayou Teche and the Bayou Vermillion, and a couple other little rivers that have also been cut off from the natural flow. So the water continues to branch out into the Mississippi River Bird's Foot Delta. So with the Bayou Teche and the Bayou Vermillion being dependent on water flowing from the Mississippi and Atchafalaya into our stream, what happened was the river became stagnant. We basically cut off the flow into the Bayou Vermillion and the Bayou Teche, and the bayou became like this stagnant petri dish. So everything, bacteria levels just went out the roof because there was nothing to flush the system out into the Gulf of Mexico. And at this point, we also see an increase in the oil field industry, right? So the late 30s, we have the oil field industry coming in to Louisiana. At the turn of the century, Louisiana was a very rural community. You know, we went from 2,000 dairy farms to now only about 200 dairy farms. So Louisiana is moving from a rural society to society that's condensed into cities. So I'm not sure if any of you still have a nice sized garden. I'm sure a couple of you do have a good sized garden, grow your own little tomatoes and stuff. But for the majority of us, they're few and far between of us can actually raise our hand and say we produce all the food on our family farm that we actually need to consume in the year. So that means that most of our food is coming into the city and it has to be packaged. That packaging is plastic, it's glass, it's metal, and all this becomes a problem when it's not disposed of properly. So we have the problem of trash and litter that we deal with. We also have the problem of increased populations. So every time we flush our toilet, that water's got to go somewhere. So it goes into either the main lines of the city, and it goes into the city's municipal treatment facilities. And fortunately for us in Lafayette, our municipal sewage treatment facilities are large enough to hold capacity of our city. Even they have enough capacity for us to even grow a little bit more. So our city's had some very foresighted individuals planning through the history of our development. However, we do still have a couple rural communities, and their effluent from every time they flush the toilet, it actually goes into their septic system. Oftentimes these septic systems are not up to date, they're not up to par, and that water is all going to eventually make it into a smaller ditch, and every ditch leads to the bayou. So with the 30s coming around and the increased population, all this is happening. We had the trapeze plant, we had rendering plants all along the Bayou Vermillion. So everything going into the Vermillion with no flow, we became the most polluted river in the entire United States. That's something to be definitely scared of. So at that point, the Army Corps of Engineers basically recognizes that for us to to manage these problems, we need to increase the flow. So take all those problems that I just introduced to you. Now there's less flow in the Vermillion. That means salt water from the Vermilion Bay is actually starting to come further and further inland. So there's a lot of rice farmers down in Vermilion Parish. They take water directly out of the Bayou Vermilion to irrigate their rice fields and their crawfish ponds. So as they were irrigating from the Vermilion, the water that they were irrigating was becoming saltier and saltier. So you put salt water onto a rice field, you're going to lose your entire crop. So not only were we dealing with the pollution, but we were also dealing with the problems with our agricultural system. So it became a major issue to introduce another flow into the Bayou Vermilion and the Bayou Teche. And that's when the Teche Vermillion Freshwater District was established in 1983. So basically what the Teche Vermillion Freshwater District does is they have a weir system and a lock system on the Bayou Teche, which allows water to, it stops water from flowing down the Bayou Teche and it holds the water in there. And then they have a pump station in Krotz Springs that takes water out of the Atchafalaya, puts it into Bayou Catawba, and then it eventually gets into the Bayou Teche. And then in Arnaville, the river system splits, so the Bayou Teche and the Vermilion split off from each other. And what happens is most of that water would want to go down the Bayou Vermilion. So they had to put a structure to slow that water's approach into the Vermilion River so you can keep more water on the Bayou Teche, because we had farmers irrigating from the Bayou Teche as well. And then by the time the water gets to Lafayette, there's not enough water, so they dug the Evangeline Canal. I don't know if you all have ever gone from Lafayette to Lake Martin. If you leaving Lafayette, go to Lake Martin, it's called the Lake Martin Highway. But if you're leaving Lake Martin and you're going to Lafayette, it's called the Prairie Highway. So it's the same road, just different names. And the Evangeline Canal and the Ruth Canal are actually the same canal. They're just named differently. So if you go from the Vermilion to the Teche, it's called the Evangeline. If you go from the Teche to the Vermilion, it's called the Ruth Canal. But the structure was built to basically get more water into the Vermilion from the Bayou Teche. So now we have enough water flowing down through the system. The system is controlled by a set gauge height. Whenever the water in Bayou Catawba reaches a certain level, the pumps either come on or they go off. And they can basically control the flow in the Bayou Teche and the Bayou Vermilion with the flick of a switch now, which was necessary because of the flooding project of building the levee system. So at that point, in 1984, the citizens of Lafayette rallied together. Thanks for Ms. Sarah Scheffler and Mr. Harrell. We basically came together and the citizens said, well, look, we want to do something about the problems in the Vermilion. So they also had problems at this point in time with people putting oil from little gas stations and service stations. They would just put it straight into the storm drains, and most people didn't recognize that everything that's going down the storm drain is not going to the sewage treatment facility. It's actually going straight to the river. So dealing with all of these problems, the Bayou Vermilion District was voted into existence by the citizens of Lafayette back in 1984. So that becomes one of our largest mandates, is to do whatever we can to improve the water quality in the Bayou Vermilion. And another part of our mandate is to improve and introduce economic development into along the banks of the river. So in the 80s, late 70s into the early 80s, we saw a downturn in the oil industry, right? So oil prices started falling. Our major economy, which was based off of the oil industry, started to plummet. So there was this huge push to try to diversify our economy. So that's when the idea of Vermillionville came around, and basically focusing on cultural tourism to bring people into the community. So as a cultural economy, basically Vermillionville sees about 50,000 visitors every year. A lot of our visitors come from France. They come from all over the United States and all over the world for that matter. So this is all money that's coming into Lafayette. They're coming to enjoy the culture. They're coming to see the lives that we live. And basically, they come and sing, they come and dance, they come and eat our food, and they leave their money, and then they go back home. So the cultural economy is actually the second largest economy in Louisiana, oil still being way far the first major economic fuel source for Louisiana, but the cultural economy is actually second up there, although it's still ways down. So in 1990, Vermillionville was created, and I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with Vermillionville. It's a cultural history museum. We brought over 7 original structures. The oldest structure at the historical village is actually the Armand Broussard House, which was the son of Beausoleil Broussard, the first Acadian to come into Louisiana back in 1765. So the Armand Broussard House was actually built and constructed in 1790, and this house has been moved from Louisville. It had a temporary home in New Iberia for some time, and then eventually it made its way into our village, where people can walk through the house and see basically the old architecture. Viewing the architecture of our ancestors is absolutely amazing. They didn't have television, they didn't have the weather system and the weather channel to tell us what everything was going to be happening. So their structures were built very sound, and all their structures basically were almost flawless. So whenever a drop of rain fell on the roof, it would make its way all the way to the ground. If it fell on the windowsill, it would make its way all the way to the ground. So the angles, the curves, and being able to see the architecture of our ancestors, how they dealt with the elements, it's pretty amazing, actually. And if you want some good tips of how to build and what to do in your own style of architecture, it's a really nice resource to be able to still have around. So we have 7 original structures over there. We also have some reconstructed structures. We have a performance center which hosts Sunday dances from 1 to 4 every Sunday. We kind of alternate between Cajun and a Zydeco band. So not only are we a resource for visitors coming in from out of town, but we're also a resource for Lafayette citizens as well. The part of the organization that I work for is the Bayou Vermillion District. So we have the Bayou Vermillion District, and we have Vermillionville, which is a part of the district. So my job over there is environmental awareness. So I work specifically with lots of school groups. We have a little exhibit that touches on everything to do with water, everything from the importance of our planet's location in the solar system. It's kind of like that Goldilocks little thing. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. So just being a part of this planet Earth is an amazing blessing just to be a part of. So we cover everything from the location of the Earth, and then we walk all the students basically through everything to do with water. We cover rain, we cover snow, we cover hurricanes, tornadoes. We talk about how the water interacts with the earth. We talk about the earth's processes of making mountains and earthquakes, because those mountains become the boundaries of where the water is going to go. So the Mississippi River drains about 41% of the United States. The continental United States, 41% of the land in the United States basically makes its way through Louisiana. And the way that water flows is determined by where those mountains are. So there's a huge marriage between the environment and the water coming down here, and how that water has affected our culture. We're very blessed. I mean, we get about 60 inches of rain on average per year. So we have lots of rain, we have lots of water resources, and all this has added to our identity as a culture. So that's a lot of what I do. I wish I had a little video here. I'm actually gonna pass this around. And unfortunately, this is pretty much what we deal with on an everyday basis. So this is a little video. I'm gonna walk this around the room, and this is a video of what the coulee looks like whenever it's raining. So if you can imagine a train with about 100 cars being towed behind it, that's the amount of trash that's coming down the coulees into the Vermillion every time it rains.
Is that at 1252?
I'm sorry?
Is that at the bridge at 1252?
This coulee right here is, this is the Webb coulee. So this is pretty much the northern part of the parish. This is from the interstate to, there's a little shotgun range.
That's where it empties into the river?
That's where it empties into the river, and you can,
And you'll have something to
That's not close to your house.
yes.
I live where this happens. It's just full of cups.
look at the trash.
And that happens every
Vermillion
time
Boulevard
it
and
rains.
Bridge. I'm telling you, what is it? And it's right here. People can throw things in the river. I don't know. I think you're right. Try to keep it clean down there on the ground area.
Right, so that yellow line that you see right there is actually a oil containment boom. So we utilize the technology of the oil industry. So this boom system is actually used to contain oil spills. So it floats on top of the water and then it goes into the water about 8 to 12 inches. And then the oil is contained, and then they go in with absorbent pads, remove the oil, and dispose of it properly. So we basically use these oil containment booms. We have them located in a lot of the coulee systems. And what that allows us to do is basically bring the trash to one specific location, and the crew's out there on a daily basis dealing with the amount of litter. So in 2014, we pulled out 38 tons of plastic bottles, styrofoam cups, aluminum cans, glass bottles. This is not counting the couches and the refrigerators and the large appliances, the tires, and unfortunately dead animals. So this is a byproduct of our modern society living in the cities, right? So what do we do about it? So I guess I'll get into that a little bit later. So we deal with trash. That's one of the main things that we deal with. So not only do we have man-made trash that's coming into the bayou and the river system, but we also have organic debris, right? So as the river is moving and shifting through the ages, the river naturally cuts on one bank and it builds the bank into the bayou at some point. So we have trees that fall down. These trees float down. Oftentimes they get caught on the bridges. So the crew we have this really nice system. So we have a couple 30-foot barges. One of the barges has this mechanical crane arm. So we can go in there, we can remove these logs, we can cut them up into pieces to where they could either float down the river. If they're too big, we'll move them on to the bank. And that allows navigation for the channel, so you can take your boat up through the bridges and not have to worry about busting the bottom end of your lower end unit on your motor on the logs. And it also helps to maintain the structural integrity of the bridges, because if the log jams were allowed to stay, the water has to go somewhere. So the water eventually eats away at the bank of the bridge, where the bridge and the pilings are meeting, and the bridge can fall in if the bank erodes too far and too deep. So that's another thing of what we do. And we also have a water quality monitoring program, so we kind of keep our eye on the quality of our river. So from 1976, we've gone from one of the most polluted, or the most polluted river in the United States, to a river that actually supports recreational boating and fishing the majority of the year. So there's quite a bit of progress that's been made. A lot of that has to do with the flow that has been reintroduced to the river, and a lot of that has to do with the educational part of the district and the community members themselves. There are lots of organizations out there that are specifically focused on getting the community involved and basically teaching people what we can do and what we should not be doing to keep our river healthy. We also have boat launches, so there's 3 motorboat access points. So to make that connection, right? So for people to appreciate the river and to appreciate the beauty of the river, they actually need to get out on the river and see the beauty and the majesty of the river for themselves. So we have public access points up and down the bayou. There's 3 public motorboat launches, and we also have 4 canoe and kayak launches, and Vermillionville is also one of our access points. Public education, this is where my job comes in. We go out into the community. We have students that come into the village. So getting the word out, getting with teachers, and connecting with the children is one of our big priorities. We work with a number of different community organizations. There's Trees Acadiana, which actually grit trees, and they make a big push to plant trees into the community. We work with them, and we have a little nursery on the property where we can water the trees and keep them alive until the volunteers for Trees Acadiana can get them out into the community. So trees are a very, very important part of water quality as well. So all that water, as it's coming down, it's going to hit the ground and it's going to roll off the banks. It's going to go into the bayou, and it's also going to soak into the soil. So those trees are taking water that's soaking into the soil, and they're lifting it. And just as your body sweats to keep you cool, so when you start getting hot, you start sweating, and that cooling effect of that sweat evaporating off of you actually helps to cool your body. So trees taking this water from the ground, bringing it up into the atmosphere, into the sky, is creating more cooling effect for our city. So our city is much more nicer, it's more enjoyable sitting under the shade of a tree. Not only is it blocking the sun, but it's also sweating for you to remain nice and cool. So trees are a huge part of protecting our environment. And we also work with the Bayou Vermillion Preservation Association. This little organization is really intent on doing a lot of education. They've done quite a bit for the river, and we have lots of working relationships with different community organizations. One of my little projects that I started was a recycling bin loan program. So if you've ever been to the festivals, you can see the amount of people that come in to the festivals to enjoy Lafayette. Our festival resources bring in a ton of people into Lafayette. And a lot of these people are coming from out of town. They're coming to enjoy the festivals. They're staying at local hotels. They're eating and dining at local restaurants. They're coming to the festivals. The festivals are serving them and feeding them. And these people, well, they leave quite a bit of trash whenever they're there. So one of the projects that I went on adventure for is to provide the proper tools for people to dispose of their trash. Most people want to do the right thing. A lot of times they don't have the tools to do the right thing. So the Recycle Bin Loan Program provides them with the tools to dispose of their litter and trash responsibly. And the first time we employed the project was for Festival Acadiana this year, and it was just an amazing experience to see a festival with almost no litter on the ground. It was a total eye-opening experience. My take on it whenever I'm working with the kids is, so the program is specifically focused on recycling. A lot of cans, a lot of plastic, all these products can actually be recycled and made back into products that can be used in our product stream. So when I work with the kids, my whole mission is to show them that even our waste has a usefulness. So if the kids can understand that even waste, even trash has value, if they can understand this, they can find value pretty much in everything and everyone that they come into contact with. So that's my mission, that's my goal, that's one of my little babies that I've started, and that's what I do. We also do storm drain markings for the kids and community organizations. So everything that goes into the storm drain is going to continue to go downstream. It's eventually going to be a part of, if it's leaves, if it's litter, if it's trash, if it's any of this that floats, it's eventually going to make its way to the coulee system and then into the bayou. So we mark storm drains, and that brings a little awareness to people who look down at the storm drains. This little marker that says dump no waste because this drains to the bayou. And then we have Vermillionville. So said already, 50,000 visitors into Vermillionville on an annual basis. We have all the homes. We have a full service restaurant. So we're open from Tuesday through Sunday. We have a full service restaurant. We do plate lunches. We do a buffet on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We have cultural festivals where we focus on the main cultures that have added to South Louisiana. So we focus specifically on the Native Americans who became the bases. Those were the people who showed us how to survive. And we have lots of Native American cultures and traditions kind of tied into our culture that we don't recognize. So we kind of highlight these to show people how connected to that Native American culture we are. We also highlight the Creole culture there, our connection to the black community, the Creoles of Africa, the free people of color, how they have led to our culture. So gumbo, purple hull peas, rice, all of this stuff, these are all products that came into Louisiana from Africa. So there's a lot of culture that we have and we are because of our connection to the black community. And of course, the Acadian culture of the Acadians that came down from Nova Scotia. We have artisans out there. They're out there. They do their little custom crafts. So we have people who spin cotton. We have someone in the blacksmith shop that's forging. We have musicians. So basically the village is a recreation of what life would have looked like between the time of 1765 to 1890. So you can come in, the people dress like they're in costume. The place looks like you're just stepping back into time, and it's a beautiful resource. We also do cooking demonstrations, and of course the community gatherings. We host weddings and receptions. So it's quite a resource not only for our visitors but also for our community as well. And where we're going from here, right? So this is kind of a little glimpse of where we've come and where we're going, right? So on April the 9th, we're actually going to be going up to the citizens of Lafayette Parish, and they're going to have a chance to vote on reinstalling our millage. So this isn't a new tax. This is actually a property tax, and the millage is 0.75 mils, and that kind of equals out to about $12 a year. So if you have a house and your house is about $200,000 worth, the amount of property tax that you would pay would equal probably about $12 a year to basically continue the funding. If you don't have property, then basically you don't pay into the funding operation of the organization. And we're also going up for another millage to help us continue the projects that we're working on. So we have some of those boat launches, some of those gazebo facilities. They're between 20 and 30 years old. Some of them are starting to fall apart. So to maintain and make sure that those are in operable order, there's a bond that we're looking at going up for, and that'll allow us to continue our development of the river, making sure that we have access points for the community. We're looking at putting restroom facilities at our parks along the bayou. You could actually get into the bayou and float down it if you're wanting to go in a canoe or kayak. However, if you stop at some of our parks, we don't have restroom facilities, so making sure that people have the tools to enjoy the bayou. So this is everything that we're looking at. We're looking at improving the bayou in Vermillion. We have a couple of water quality projects that we're looking at. We're working with a firm, and they're creating a model of the river, and that's going to allow us to take a particular parameter. So whenever we're testing for water quality, there are particular parameters that we test for, and this company that we're working with is basically drawing a three-dimensional map of the bayou, and they can tell us how long it takes for a molecule of oxygen to get from one part of the bayou to the next, and how long that oxygen will last to help promote the propagation of fish and wildlife, and any other parameter. Basically, it'll allow us to see where do we need to approach our water quality efforts to make sure that the bayou is clean throughout Lafayette Parish. These are some of our projects. We're looking at a boat launch down on the south side of town. I don't know if you have a boat or driving the boat, but there's an ordinance in Lafayette, and you're not supposed to speed past a parked boat. And if you're going through the center of Lafayette, it's really difficult to make your way through the urban corridor without passing a parked boat. So it takes pretty much an hour to cross about 4 miles of river. So we're looking at putting a motorboat access point south of the urban corridor, which will allow people to enjoy the river in their motorboats without having to disturb the citizens along the bayou's edge. And that's pretty much our projects that we have going on. If y'all have any questions, I'll open up the floor for questions.
Yeah, I'd like to ask our president, I see you come in, Mr. Frank, do you have special questions?
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Appreciate the fine presentation. I know that there was a tremendous flood, the flood of 1927, and that created a plan with reference to the levees and the locks and all that. And I noticed this year, as every year, the Mississippi River reaches peaks at a certain level, and then there's a opening of the locks, and it flows into the basin, and it's connected to the Tesh and to the Vermillion. With all this planning, with all the locks and all that, if we have a strong winter up north, have we helped ourselves when the snow melts that we're going to be able to maintain high ground or prevent the flooding in Lafayette with the way that we have everything in Lafayette, with all the water moving so quickly to the bayous and all that?
Right. So you're asking what's our flood control look like in Lafayette?
Yeah,
how
we
connected
plan
are we?
good for now, but what about the next 30 years? Where are we?
Well, I mean, I'm not a climatologist, so I really can't tell you what that will look like. However, so this year, what they were looking at was they were contemplating whether or not to open up the Marganza spillway. So the Mississippi opens up in two main places. One of them is the Bonnet-Carré, which flows into Pontchartrain. So that'll relieve the city of New Orleans from flooding by taking that water and putting it into the Pontchartrain. So you're splitting the flow of the Mississippi right above New Orleans. They were looking at opening the Marganza, but their numbers said that that was not going to be necessary. So this year we're definitely going to be able to make it by. What is that going to look like in another 50 or 100 years? I mean, I really don't have the knowledge to say specifically on that. So I mean, that's a great question, but that's not something I can answer.
Let me rephrase the question. Do you have enough confidence in the Corps of Engineers and working with them with reference to your projects that you feel that the Corps of Engineers and the players with reference to flood control are doing the best that they can and have what they need resource-wise to properly plan for the future?
I do have confidence in the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers is this organization that'll never get a day's rest because they're manipulating the forces of nature. However, I mean, we've maintained the course of the Mississippi for a number of years. That Atchafalaya Basin, if in fact they start seeing multiple events where the Atchafalaya is beginning to flood, they'll probably do what they did back in 1984, which was raise the levee system of the Atchafalaya another 4 feet. So that spillway, if they build up the actual levee system for the Atchafalaya, they can pretty much add more containers for another flood. So if there is enough foresight for that to happen, I mean, they do have means to accomplish that. What that does for Lafayette, actually, with the pump stations being engineered, we're not so affected anymore. We would have been without the levee system, but now our main problem with flooding in Lafayette isn't necessarily connected to the Mississippi and the Atchafalaya. It's actually connected to our own community. So the oldest properties of Lafayette were developed on the best high ground route. And as our city is expanding, our development is actually starting to move into those low-lying areas that were naturally flooding due to the river. So our main priority was probably not going to be as much the Atchafalaya as much as making sure that the development of Lafayette doesn't encroach so far into those floodplains along the coulee lines closer to the river that the city can't handle its own floodwaters. So that's more of an issue that we're probably going to be looking at in the next 20 years as opposed to the Atchafalaya. It's going to be our development.
Will dredging the Vermillion, making it a deeper canal, would that enhance the quicker flow of water, rainwater from the Lafayette area into the Bayou Vermillion and out to the Vermillion Bay?
Yeah, that has actually been done in the past. One project that we're actually looking at currently right now, so I'm going to try to give you some examples. So Lafayette's basically on the high ground, and then, so this is Lafayette, this is where we are, and then where the airport is, the land drops off into the Atchafalaya Basin about 15 foot. So Lafayette's flood control, so y'all familiar that whenever the river floods, the water stops flowing south and actually flows north, right? So whenever the bayou starts to flow north, it's getting squeezed through that main channel, through the corridor of Lafayette, and it can't go. So what happens is it's actually backing up into that Atchafalaya Basin, right? So everything between Lafayette and Breaux Bridge is probably about 15 or 20 foot lower than the elevation of Lafayette. So when Lafayette floods, our water backs up north into this swamp system. And we're actually looking at, there's a particular bacteria that will eat muck, and there's this huge swamp system back there. We're working with Wildlife and Fisheries, the Nature Conservancy, and a couple other organizations. And basically what we're looking at is taking that muck in the Bayou Tortue swamp system and dropping it down as far as the bacteria can eat, which will allow more water to backflow. And then if in some case the Vermillion needs to be dredged, then that's going to be a Corps of Engineers project, and they're going to be the ones spearheading that.
Totally on a different subject. I've noticed near some of the storm drainage drains in Lafayette that there are guards. And I don't know if it's to keep the children out or to keep the trash out.
Right.
And does your organization have anything to do with that, or is that the city of
That's gonna be
Lafayette?
the city. Yeah. So I do know specifically that the university, UL, they've just installed grates on all of the storm drains within the limits of the university campus. And their intent is because there's this huge push towards making Lafayette cleaner, right? We have different organizations, different companies, different people coming into Lafayette. We're trying to cater to them, trying to get these people to come and develop in Lafayette. And one of the first things they say is, man, this place is a mess. There's trash and there's litter all over the place. So the university is kind of catching on to this, and those grades do help stop litter and stuff going from the streets into the storm sewer system, right? So that's going to take a more coordinated approach, making sure that the streets do remain free of leaf litter and stuff like that, because that leaf litter will clog when it gets to those drains. However, if the streets are kept cleaner, then we're limiting or reducing the amount of litter going down into the storm drain system. Is that going to go all over Lafayette? I really don't think that that's the plan. Actually, I think that the city has X'd that proposal because of the issue of making sure that the water is leaving as soon as it can. However, there are things that we can do, right? So most of the development that goes on now requires that people have retention ponds and detention ponds. There are some of these ponds that basically are just this huge ditch, and they're not holding the water when it rains. So a slight manipulation of a lot of these ponds will hold that water on the land for a slight bit longer before it gets to the bayou. Our problem in Louisiana is not a lack of water, it's an overabundance of water. So holding that water on the land as long as possible is what we should be focusing on doing. So rain barrels, catching water. Water is a tremendous resource. If we can collect that water before it gets into the bayou, we're taking care of our flood problem, plus we're creating a resource out of something that would have been a problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. Sarah, did you have a question?
So Greg, I live on the bayou and I know the water goes north when the rains get heavy. And one of the things that we have been questioning the DOTD with is extending that airport runway into that swamp system that you're talking about. And if they extend it into it, it's going into Bayou Tartu, it'll go into some of the Cypress Island swamp. And I think there's about a 40-foot difference in elevation there that they're going to have to fill or do something with. I don't know whether they're going to bridge it out and the planes will go across bridges too. But if not, all of that area, that all of this water that keeps from going into your homes down south is not going to be able to go into that swamp. So what is the BVD looking at with that, if that becomes a problem?
What do we have planned for that? So this is pretty much out of our hands. I personally don't know what the plans are as for where that new runway is going to go. If the interstate does have to be elevated, basically that means the planes are going to need a longer approach, right? So they're coming in, so the runway is going to have to be extended somehow. I have not seen the plans myself. I'm not sure if they're planning on moving the entire runway or moving it across the bayou and actually creating a bridge across the bayou. That way they could extend the runway. Personally, I don't know enough to be able to comment on what the plans for DOTD are, and I'm not sure if we even have the ability to do anything about that.
I would think that that would be something that would be of interest to be looking into. You know, that's certainly going to affect all of our lives here. And I think it would be something that the BVD, as our as our component of looking and caring for the waters that go through here, would want to do. And I would recommend that y'all find out what they're planning on doing, and let's see if it's going to beat the flow of the water for us.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ellen, you got a question?
Hi, Ella Arsamar. I kind of missed some of your information when you were talking about funding for your programs that you have. Did you say something about a millage? And is that up for renewal
It's
for
a
a
renewal.
vote? So let us know that again. I kind of missed that.
So the millage is a renewal. This is something new. This is something that the citizens basically voted on back in 1984 to establish the operations of the Bayou Vermillion District. And this is, so every 10 years, basically, the vote goes back to the citizens of Lafayette, and they basically have a choice to say whether they want to continue this operation or not. So that's basically what the millage is. It's a renewal of our funding.
When is it coming up for the vote?
So that's going to be on April 9th of this year. Yes, 2016.
Was there another question?
And it was 1 mil?
I think it's
0.75.
0.75.
0.75?
Jackie?
Missed your introduction. Sorry. My name is Jackie LeBlanc. I have comments to make. I love Vermillionville. I've been there numerous times. I have a grandson that sits in with the music on Sundays sometimes. And anybody can go if you play any kind of instrument. Mostly it's guitars and that type thing, but it's French music and accordions. And you can go there. You can go there and just sit in and play with them. You just show up. It's still that way, isn't it?
Yes.
You just show up on Sundays, and if you want to dance to the music that's playing, you could just jump in there and dance. Now, I want to ask you, there is a restaurant there. When is that restaurant open?
So the restaurant's open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we have a full menu. So there's a Cajun Creole
For
menu.
lunch?
For lunch.
For dinner?
We're open so from 11 to 2 on the weekdays, and on the weekends we're open from 11 to 3. So Friday is a seafood buffet every Friday. Saturday and Sunday is a Creole buffet every Saturday and Sunday, and the little jam session goes from 1 to 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Okay. Now, I don't know what I was going to say. Anyway, when they first started the canoeing, they came down by my house and they put this ramp down there, and I have to tell you, I was very angry about it because it was bringing people down to our area who didn't even know we existed down there. We have a beautiful place by the river, by the Camellia Boulevard Bridge. But I changed our mind 2 weeks ago.
Yeah?
I saw how much fun everybody was having that went down there to canoe, and I thought, how selfish can I be that I would not want them going down there to canoe. So, but that's all I had to ask about. But it is a beautiful place, folks, and it's very historical. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie.
Is there any comments? I think you guys did a good job of exploring all of what the possibilities are as far as eating over there. Very good. Mr. Lai, I saw you write something in your book now. But this is a great time to find out no words if you've never heard anything about Vermillionville, it's a good time, and you should probably go there more often because it's certainly the right place to be.
Oh,
Thank you.
one more question.
Come on.
I have one more question.
Go ahead, Ms. Jackie.
You're not bashful, I know that.
I thought Ms. Jackie was going to.
I have one more
Well, you have
question.
another?
If you go there to eat at the cafe, do you have to pay the entrance fee into the village?
No. The cafe is open to the public without paying admission.
You just tell them that you're there to eat and they
That's
won't
right.
charge you the entrance fee.
That's correct. If you just want to go to have lunch or whatever, you just let them know at the gift shop and they'll just let you on through to the restaurant. That's correct.
You know.
Well, folks, why don't we set a date and go there and meet and have lunch someday?
Food's great, right?
Wouldn't that be fun?
On you? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they have a buffet.
It can't cost too much.
Go that far.
Well, if you don't have any money, I can't pay for it.
It's pretty reasonable. It's a very
Friday,
reasonable.
Saturday, Sunday, they have a buffet.
Yeah, very reasonable.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they have a buffet, and it's good.
I've never been there to eat.
It's excellent. And there's an easy ramp, you can go up.
Oh, I know, I can get in there.
Yes, ma'am, you have to, it's a mandate.
I just have two quick questions. The first one is, as an environmentalist, what is your personal concern for the I-49 coming in with regard to the river from a construction phase standpoint, and secondly, increased traffic, trucking, transportation of hazardous goods, that sort of thing?
So I don't.
Right there.
It's right there. It's right. So I don't have the numbers to actually speak specifically on the I-49 connector. So I really can't voice any sort of a formal opinion on that. Those numbers are going to be determined by the traffic that is coming into Lafayette for the specific purpose of coming to Lafayette. So those numbers are going to be a DOT thing. What the specific environmental concerns are concerning the river, I'm not so sure. That would definitely be addressed by some sort of environmental impact statement that the DEQ would have to be mandated to do. So all those concerns should be addressed prior to any sort of construction by some sort of environmental impact statement. Yeah.
They did do an environmental impact statement. They were very general about it.
About it?
Just that it would be studied and they would take care of construction debris. It would have no impact on the Vermillion.
Well, I mean, I don't have the credentials to actually comment on anything like that.
That's okay. And then the second question was, I've attended a few of your Bayou Vermillionville Lunch and Learn.
Okay.
Do you all post a schedule for that in advance?
I think that's actually
And
going to
how
be
often?
the Bayou Vermillion Preservation Association.
Okay.
So that's a citizens group that was basically erected, and that's one of their main goals is education of the public concerning water quality issues. So Bayou Vermillion Preservation Association, is that .org or something like that?
Okay, so that you're something separate.
We work with those guys, but they're a citizens organization, and their focus is we kind of parallel each other's
Okay.
focus, but that is not put on by the Bayou Vermillion District. It's put on by the Preservation Association.
Okay. Would you all consider that? I mean, with this increase in industry, et cetera, in the Bayou Vermillionville area, certainly it's going to have an impact on you. And would you all consider a routine lunch and learn or reporting, or who's taking care of those numbers?
Isn't there? I believe there's they have I-49 meetings. They have public meetings that they've been hosting throughout the process, and that would be a city thing, because that's pretty much the city that's taking the lead on that, and that's going to be DOTD and the city. Sarah, you might be able to help fill in on something like that. Who's doing the I-49 connector meetings? Is that LCG?
DOTD.
So DOTD.
And I think LCG is gonna come into it if they ever crank out their Tiger grant, so.
Right. So it's basically gonna be the city and DOTD that's gonna be putting on those luncheons and topics.
Right. But which organization would be monitoring the change in the Vermillion?
Well,
and the quality that you can anticipate?
We would continue our monitoring program, and
Okay.
so we already sample. So whatever we're sampling, it would just be making sure, just monitoring those samples, and if there is some sort of change, then we would catch it through the monitoring program.
But Greg, what do y'all monitor for? What are
The parameters? So there are a number of parameters. So of course we take temperature and pH. These are basic chemistry parameters. We also test for turbidity. Turbidity is actually the color of the bayou. So one of the main influences for turbidity is either going to be from agricultural runoff from sugarcane farms. Whenever that water is washing off of a sugarcane field that's just been cut or it's just been planted, whenever it rains, that soil leaves the land, it comes into the water, and the soil belongs on the land. When it gets into the water, that's a problem. So we test for the color of the water, the amount of sediment in the water. We also test for fecal coliform, and so fecal coliform itself is not a harmful bacteria. However, it's associated with other pathogens that exist in the bellies of warm-blooded animals, so it's used as a testing parameter. So we test for this. Let's see, and I believe nitrogen. So the nitrogen gives us an idea of what kind of fertilizers and things are coming into the river, and it's called biological oxygen demand. So, and dissolved oxygen. So dissolved oxygen is basically the amount of oxygen that's in the water. So for fish to breathe, they pass water through their gills, and there's oxygen that's actually dissolved in the water. So their gills filter that out, and that's where they breathe. So we test the quantities of dissolved oxygen in the water for fish propagation and biological oxygen demand. And what that does is it tells us how fast the bayou water is actually using up the oxygen in the water. So if there's an increased load of organics or leaf debris that's being blown into the water, when that leaf debris decays, it uses up that valuable oxygen that fish need. So the demand for that oxygen is going to be increased during certain times of the year. And these are all parameters that the Department of Environmental Quality use to determine the health of a bayou and a waterway. So from those parameters, the Department of Environmental Quality either gives your river a check and say you're good to go, or it gives you a red line and saying you need to do something about this. And those are basically what we test for.
Byron. Quick comment and then a question. Back in the 70s, Pack and Paddle had a place over there just off of Pinhook. We rented a canoe from them one time, paddled on down, just had a good time. Getting when the bayou right, it's very pretty. And that's back when it was really dirty. And as we passed down the area behind West Bayou Parkway, right behind one of the residences there, we saw open pipes and feces and urine coming out of that directly into the bayou. And there was a pipe. Tide was out, and there was about a 4-inch pipe sticking this far out of the water. And there was just black sludge. It looked like organic material just being oozed out of it. Somebody was pumping it out. And of course, we have that fine new facility there for treating water and everything, but I assume they were pumping their residue back into the bayou. And that wasn't right. I thought later I should have taken a sample of that to find out what they were pumping back into it. Now, so far as testing the water, do you test biphenyls? Do you test for any oil or any crude coming out of it? There's still a whole lot of things there that you're not testing for. Just like our drinking water here in Lafayette. I think you ought to do a more comprehensive test other than just basic organic content, chlorides and things like that. I'd like to see you test for chemicals in it as well. Thank you.
So there is a professor at the university, Paul Clerks. He has a class, and we actually take his class out on the river 2 or 3 times a year, at least once a semester, and his class actually tests for heavy metals. So there are other parameters that are being tested in the river, but not.
And what are their results?
Coming out of the city, I think Coulimine does have a little bit of sludge that's coming out of the city. Most of that sludge is going to be coming from the urban corridor. As for oils and anything, I don't believe that there's enough reason to test. If we were closer to the Gulf, and we would be more susceptible to all the oil industry spilling and leaking. We don't go that far down. We're basically within Lafayette Parish itself.
It would be nice to have a baseline, though.
A baseline. I tell you, if you can give me some of the parameters that you're questioning, I'd definitely be willing to kind of look into that and see if there has been any sort of background test that's been done on that. There are a number of organizations that have tested, and UL's one of them. But for the most part, the Department of Environmental Quality puts out a listing of parameters. So we're kind of going off of what the state is telling us. So as the state comes down, they're mandated from the EPA. So the EPA tells the states that you need to reach this certain quality, and then the states basically go out and test for that and see what we need to do to get our rivers and waterways up to that. And the parameters that we're testing are basically the ones that Department of Environmental Quality are concerned with.
Is there a phone number where we can reach you and not just an office?
Yeah, you can. So my number is 233-4077.
Okay.
And that's extension 215.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Any additional questions? All right. Certainly a round of applause. Certainly. I can't promise this, but in talking, and as Jackie mentioned, how great the food's been there, we can possibly do an extra just gathering of people that love to have a great Friday buffet on seafood, I believe you said. That'd be a great day. So we would try to maybe get a few of us to meet and to try out the food and find out how it's going on with Vermillionville. We appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Our next meeting will be the 7th of March, and we've got, what's his name, Mr. Bill, is supposed to be here. They said that they were here at the last meeting, that they got questions that they've been asked, and they're supposed to come back. If they, for some reason, if they can't make it out, we will let you know who that speaker is. Important as well, too, you might, March the 21st, we have the superintendent of schools here, Mr. Don Aguilar, Dr. Aguilar, and he's going to be making a presentation and give us reasons why we should vote for additional tax for our educational system and buildings and various, so you'll have an opportunity to ask those questions and get up to date on that. And we appreciate everyone coming here this evening. Thank you very much, and you guys have a great evening.